Oh, thanks everyone for joining us today. We've received an incredibly positive response to our CEO interview series with our senior leaders as they share their insights and knowledge. We've been recording these sessions and sharing them out with our audiences both here in New Zealand and internationally. Today, I've got the pleasure of welcoming Nick Astwick. Nick is the CEO of Southern Cross Health Society and previously CEO of Kiwi Bank, joining us to share his insights on moving the business to remote working and keeping staff engaged. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks, Roz. That's Chief Operating Officer.
Sorry, Chief
Kiwi
Operating
Bank,
Officer.
not CEO of Kiwi Bank.
Oh, welcome. Nice to have you here.
Fantastic. Great to be here.
So, Nick, we've spoken about the transition of Southern Cross to remote working. For the benefit of others listening in on this presentation, can you just provide some details about the size and scale and the location of the Southern Cross offices and people?
Great. Well, let's just first size and scale of Southern Cross. So we're about 880,000 members, which are our customers and I guess our shareholders, for a better word. We're a friendly society. We have about $1.2 billion worth of premium a year. We also serve about 4,000 businesses in health insurance as well. And we process, I guess, claims around 13,000 claims a day. That's about 3.8 million claims a year. And that's almost about $1 billion that we pay out. Now, the difference in the Southern Cross, given that we are a friendly society, a not-for-profit, is basically 85, 86, 87 cents of our premium. 87% of that goes back out to fund healthcare rather than shareholder return. So that's probably the size of our organisation. So actually quite a large-scale organisation. In terms of people that work at Southern Cross, we have about 800 odd people. That's not FTE. That's during this pandemic response that we had to look after. We have most of those people are housed in a physical building in Britomart in Takatai Square. There's probably about 550 people there. We have a large operational centre in Hamilton, and then we've got some satellite offices in Christchurch, Wellington, and in the regions, largely for our sales team.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, it's very scale. It's a large-scale organisation, so I think it's interesting to hear how you're coping with all of that across New Zealand. So, in terms of your response to the initial lockdown back in March, what were the challenges that you originally faced when we hit lockdown?
Well, like everyone else, I'm sure, in the co-op community and in the business community, we had probably three big challenges, and that's probably created our pandemic response plan. So the first part of our pandemic response plan was protect our people. This at its core was a health and safety risk. It was and so our obligations to look after our people came first. And we always wanted to make sure that we followed in line with, I guess, the best advice, which is largely coming from the ministry, and taking all reasonable steps for us was making sure that people, particularly under level 3 and 4, weren't in our buildings. And so that was a big strategic call. First is that we're not going to run the health society, albeit we were a critical business, from our physical premise. So I think the first one was some decisions that we had to make to obviously protect our people and get them at home under level 4 lockdown conditions. So that was challenge number one. Challenge number two was why we were on our way to mobilising our workforce, and that was the second stage of our pandemic response plan, was mobilise our workforce. About half of our workforce had not worked outside the building. And so within 48 hours, we largely had to equip and enable, I guess, half of our workforce to be able to be working at home. Now, the last 2 years, we had invested quite a lot in our digital foundations. We had all the platforms to do that. We're on our way to an activity-based working environment, but the final 10% had to happen in 48 hours. And I've heard these stories across industries, I guess we were a scaled agile organisation for 48 hours to make that happen. So I think the second thing was, how did we equip, enable, and then over the period of time of level 4, I guess empower our people to be fully mobilised. Today we are a fully mobilised business. Location doesn't matter. The other thing I would say in that mobilisation is, over the last 2 or 3 years, we had invested heavily in being a digital business for our members and our customers. So today, 82% of all our processes are done digitally without touch by a human. So if you think about processing 3.8 million claims a year, 13,000 a day, those systems had to be fully operational. So that was a blessing that we had invested in that, because if we'd still been manual, we would have had some greater challenges there. So that was mobilising our workforce. The third part of our pandemic response plan we called cushioning the blow. Obviously, the personal balance sheets and business balance sheets of our customers and of our members were getting disrupted by this, and will continue for the next couple of years to be. So the biggest challenge in there was, how do we support people that are vulnerable from a financial perspective, that have been made redundant, that are under duress. And also too, I guess, and you saw that in our pledge of $50 million back to the membership, was if the private system is closed for a period of time and I'm paying to access it, that disruption, how do we handle that? So that sort of softened the blow, was about giving members some money back, to making sure our financial care packages were in place, and that still goes on today. And I think the fourth phase, so they were probably the 3 challenges: protecting our people, mobilising our fully workforce, and I guess cushioning the blow for our members and customers. The fourth part of our pandemic response round was the sense of coming out strong. How do we, the market is forever changed, how does Southern Cross remain relevant in what is a very different market? And that's still the job at hand.
So I think that's really relevant, because obviously that's the same challenges that most of our members have faced. So it's really good to hear you talking about you formalising it. And in terms of the key steps needed to put in place to move to remote working, I mean, you mentioned that you were quite technologically savvy, but what's the actual practicalities of applying that?
Well, I think there's a couple of components to be able to move to activity-based working, and we're sort of a long way through that journey, but well and truly not finished. The first is the tools all have to be there. That's the reality. If the technology does not work, and actually the culture of people really valuing people that are not next to you in the physical building, I think that's the first thing. We spend a lot of time making sure the tools, and I must say, the modern tools, Microsoft Teams, the Office 365 suites, they, compared to their, I guess, original incarnations, are a lot better for enabling some cross-team collaboration and team collaboration. So the tools have got to be there. Secondly, I would say, we've got to, I guess, have the operating models for that. So agile models and those things, the ability to see what work needs to be done. The ability, and remember, operations is a little bit more transparent in terms of the work that needs to be done compared to other parts of the organisation. So seeing the work needs to be done, meeting, having the operating model to make sure that that happens. And we were on our way to a scaled agile business. And so having those things in place was quite key. But I think the hardest one is always, if you've got 800 odd people sitting in their homes, how do you get connection to the strategy? How do you get connection to the outcomes that we want to do to deliver for our customers and our members? And I've always been wary that that breaks down, like over time. So actually the challenge is really a leadership challenge at its core. How do leaders lead differently? To ensure people are connected when they're not just in their line of sight. And so that's where we're investing a lot of time and effort in making sure that leadership does lead differently, but also more purposefully in ensuring that people are collaborating at the organisational level, that they're still tied to those important.
So just expanding on that, give us a live example. So how often would you be talking to the 800? I'm assuming you're using the virtual platform like we are now. Is that what you're expecting your teams to be, your leadership team to be doing regularly and you're doing personally?
Yes, I think what happens very well in these is your immediate team connects every day, yeah, and so through the virtual platform, your immediate team. And so we might have 40 or 50 immediate teams in the organisation all connecting daily. The question is, how do we connect all those teams with each other? Yeah, because in a physical building, you can walk past, you can go and see. You know, it's those accidental collisions are more natural, yeah, in those sorts of things, which are more unnatural in those. So we are doing a lot more broadcasting to there. We're doing a lot more communications. We are doing a lot more cross-functional teams. And with Agile, we are forcing more divisional teams to work across the organisation in those scrums to ensure that they're delivering outcomes for customers and members. So again, the operating model and leadership is changing, yeah, and the way we communicate has to change.
No, that's great. And I guess what a lot of people are trying to work through at the moment is, you know, you've had this experience, and as has everyone. You know, how do you see it in terms of staff moving back to operating prior to lockdown? Do you see them moving back into the office, or what is that going to look like?
Well, we probably prior to lockdown had about 70% of our buildings occupied. I think the market's probably around 75 at any one time. Yeah. Obviously, we went to 0% at the extreme under level 4. As we bounced down, level 4, level 3, level 2, level 1, we sort of settled in the last 100 days prior to this latest lockdown at about 30% of our buildings getting utilised at any one time. Yep. So it would peak and trough from that. And I suspect we will swing back in a more sustainable to about 50-50. So it will never be the same again. In fact, we want an activity-based working environment. Location doesn't matter in our model, yeah. And flexible working is what we deeply believe in, yeah. So about 50-50, I think we would see the pendulum swing back to the centre. We have made decisions to change our building footprint, so we are moving to a new building and reducing that footprint by 1/3, yeah, and saving our members 25% on our rental costs a year. That was we'd made that decision well before lockdowns, but it was timely, yeah. And we've changed the way that physical footprint is going to work now, rather than just having desks. Yep, it's a lot more mobile workstations and moving around. Yep. So we've actually had to rethink some of those physical footprints. But I think the mindset is, am I still a physical business? Am I still a virtual business? Yep. Leaders have to change their mindsets, and they have to lead differently based on that.
Yeah, I get that sense from a lot of people in terms of how they keep connected, as you say, and keep everyone working towards the same vision and outcome.
That's right.
So in terms of additional support, have you had to provide your staff any additional support now that they're remote working, in terms of personally, health and wellbeing, technology, etc., etc.?
Yes, well, obviously we're a health and wellbeing business, so we have to lead by example. And so, yes, we provided in level 4, level 3, level 2, a lot of mental resilience, physical, all those sorts of things. We have a Switch to Well program, which largely is investing in the health and well-being of our people. So that came to the fore. We paid for their internet access and their electricity bills over that period of level 4 lockdown. Yeah. And we furnished them with the tools that they needed to work from home. Yeah, because they still had to serve our customers and members every single day. So there was that sort of acceleration under that high risk environment to put as much support around our people as possible. Those have sort of, some of those, I guess, were appropriate for level 4, but not appropriate for level 2 and 1. But again, that's some of the challenges, you know, from a health and safety perspective. How do we sustain working from home? Yeah, how do we make sure that the health and safety of our people are well looked after in a different environment where we can't see them, or we can't, you know, curate that completely. But again, leadership was quite key. Daily check-ins with everyone, a lot of conversations going on, not too dissimilar to any other businesses.
Oh, that's great. I had a question here about consolidating your facilities to reduce costs, but I think you've already responded to that in terms of your discussion about the change in the footprint. So unless there's anything else you'd like to add on that one.
No, that's...
No, I guess, well, what would be really interesting is there any other messages that you would put out to other organisations looking to go down the same track of remote working and moving to, you know, a greater percentage of staff flexible working?
Well, I think, I mean, this was a giant experiment. Yeah, businesses that could, and I must admit, there was many businesses that couldn't, you know, and still can't today. They are physical businesses, but the businesses that can implement flexible working, we had a giant experiment, and actually, a lot of our employees really found themselves for certain work a lot more productive in that. You know, they save money. They're not on the motorway for 2 hours a day. Yeah, they can balance their work life. Well, they can balance I guess the productivity of their work a lot better. So there was certain work that is a lot better to be done outside the physical space. And so we had this giant experiment. We're a big believer of, I guess, flexible working. We think an empowered, enabled employee will deliver to our customers, which will deliver to our collective membership. And so you've got to be all in, but you've also got to be have a bit of a black hat on this as well. Yep, you do need to be reasonably astute to understand that we want a team, I guess, of 800 people every day delivering the outcomes of our strategy. And so you've got to be cognizant of the different leadership, the different types of communication. So I think it is a very thoughtful process. It's a very purposeful process, but it is well worth it.
No, that's great, and I think what you just said that rings so true is it does feel like we're in a giant experiment at the moment. So you know, things are shifting constantly. So people are, you know, this is really good to hear how you've attacked this situation. So Nick, thanks so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
We appreciate, you know, everyone's operating with so many unknowns, which is creating a lot of uncertainty, as we know. And it's great to hear from subject matter experts such as yourself. I guess just to wrap this up, I'd like to say we're here, Co-operative Business New Zealand's here to support anyone looking to establish a co-op or move to the model, or just in terms of supporting our members. And if you're interested, please do reach out. Always remembering that cooperatives form 19% of New Zealand's GDP, and you really are fundamental to the way that we do business here in New Zealand. So kia kaha, everyone. Thanks.
Well said.